Hey guys, to help run the forums, host the website, and travel, we've introduced a universal service fee for in-depth coverage, including this video. The goal is to be transparent and unbiased. This is not an endorsement. It's a privilege to serve you. Let's get into it.
Hey guys, what's going on? You can tell where I am based on the mural behind me. I'm at Vintage Electric in Santa Clara, California. It's actually in the South Bay area. And I'm here checking out the Vintage Scrambler. It's a really cool electric bike with lots of awesome custom features that I'm really excited to tell you more about. But I'm actually here with Andrew. Andrew, what's going on?
How's it going?
Good. So Andrew, tell me a little bit about the Scrambler and kind of how it came about.
Yeah, so the Scrambler is built off of our throttle bike platform. So when we started out, we were building the Tracker, which is much more of an on-road, board track inspired bike. And this is just that little bit more aggressive, more adventure oriented. Now this has this inverted suspension fork on it, those big beefy knobby tires, so when you want to go rip down a fire road, you can. And then it has our new big battery pack that's 23.5 amp hours, so you can get up to a 75-mile range on this thing.
Whew, awesome. That's a great overview. I'm kind of getting overwhelmed with all the cool stuff to show you. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into the details of it. Okay, so as Andrew was saying, this has a lot of really cool features on it. Particularly, you know, the fork is a fork with like a custom crown and custom stem and handlebars. This casing for the battery pack, this is a custom set. I mean, they have lots of really cool features on this that make it a very striking bike overall, and that's one of the selling points of the bike is the look. This bike is definitely going for a particular look of kind of like the kind of cafe racer sort of high speed, almost like a motorcycle sort of motif that you have going on with the entirety of the bike here. But let's go ahead and jump into some of the mechanical specifications because they're pretty detailed. So we'll start up at the front of the bike with the tires, because that's an easy thing. These are a 26 by 2.5 Schwalbe Blackjack. They have a little bit of a knob for them, so this bike is actually made for some off-road purposes. Up in the front you have a fairly thin 14 gauge spoke, and that's fine because the back end has a lot more of the abuse on the back end, and those spokes are a little thicker. Those are 12 gauge in the back. But yeah, these 14 gauge spokes with the black spokes and the silver screws on here. Coming into the central hub, this is actually a 203 millimeter disc right here on the brake. So these are some brakes that I have not encountered personally before. I mean, I've encountered a 203 millimeter rotor, but what I have not encountered is that these are the ProMax Lucid brakes, which have an integrated system for the regenerative braking. So this bike does have regenerative braking that is built into the mechanical system for the brakes and the levers up here, and also into the electric system. And it's actually pretty smart, I guess, for lack of, you know, at the risk of sounding trite. It's pretty smart. It's a system that will give energy back into the battery, but it will not do so if the battery is already fully charged, and also it will do so at a rate that won't adversely affect the battery. It's actually a pretty intelligent system, and it also kind of eases into the braking. It doesn't throw it all at you at once like some other systems that I've tried in the far past. So it's a pretty intelligent system the way that the regenerative braking engages, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we're on the ride test. But in the back of the bike, another kind of detail that they have on the brakes, I'm getting the wrong side. Another detail that they have on the back of the bike is that this is a 180 millimeter rotor in the back. Now, as you may know, when you're riding a bicycle, the majority of the braking power comes from the front of the vehicle. So that's why they have a larger rotor on the front at 203 millimeter. And on the back, they have a 180. They said that they tested out bikes that had a duplicate set, and it was just too much power on the back, so they had to switch it up. So this is almost like the antithesis of a bike that you would buy from a catalog, where it's actually not being designed by somebody. They're actually just flipping through and picking out a bike. This bike from Vintage Electric has been curated, you know, to be this way in so many ways. And we'll kind of get into more of the custom parts. This fork is really cool. This is a 60 millimeter travel inverted fork. So you see the travel right here. This is the internal part, and this is the external part that kind of slides over it. And it has this motorcycle styling to it. Up on the crown, you have a mount for the Vintage Cycles custom headlight, which is right in here. There's 6 LEDs inside of this light right here. That's a 6-volt battery, or a 6-volt power supply that's getting that out there. And it's a pretty light, pretty nice light too. So to kind of stay on track, this fork has some pretty cool features to it, in that because it's a fork that's designed principally for motorcycles, it's actually a pretty strong fork, all things considered. And you have these nice leather wraps on the outside of the fork. This is a nice little touch point that they put here so that when you're rotating the fork all the way around, that it's not going to come into metal to metal contact and kind of scratch up your frame. So that's a nice thing that they put on both sides of the fork there, to kind of keep the bike looking nice, and it really matches the aesthetic of it all, you know, having kind of like the hand-stitched look to it. So this handlebar is actually a custom handlebar that they have custom made by a company to get just the right sweep and just the right bend. So I'd call it kind of a low rise, kind of a low sweep to it, as it kind of comes in to meet you just a little bit, because they still want your weight kind of forward a tiny bit as you're riding this bike, because it's a high speed capable bike. And I'll kind of get into that in the electric system. On the handlebars, you have these nice grips. So this particular one is rocking some of the Brooks Brothers grips. They have their own custom grips that the bike comes with that are very similar to this. This exact one has the Brooks on it because they were showing it to a customer. But the grips have these rings of leather that are kind of put together, and they actually match with the rest of the leather on the bicycle as well. So the frame, of course, has a vintage look, no pun intended, but the frame has this look to it here with kind of like the larger tube up here close to the front tube, kind of sweeping back down to cover the battery casing that fills into the triangle right there. And of course this tube coming down to the back. This is holding a fair amount of weight. This battery actually does not come off, at least not without a whole lot of work. This battery is intended to stay on the bicycle at all times. And you have a charge port down here. You can remove this little plug. So that's your charge port to charge the battery with the plug that you would have plugged into the wall. Continuing with the mechanical system, the pedals over here do have some reflectors that have not been installed quite yet. This is a metal pedal. It's aluminum alloy, and there's a 170 millimeter crank that you have coming into the Spyder right here. Okay, so let's move into the mechanical system. So as you can tell by that die-cast battery casing in the middle, as well as that very large Crystalite motor, and as well as, you know, they're certainly not afraid to add some weight up on the fork or with the light. This is a heavy bicycle. The bicycle in total weighs 86 pounds. It's 86 pounds for the bike as you see it right here. The motor itself weighs in at about 14 pounds. The battery and controller system that's all right here in the middle of the bike, that all weighs in at about 21 pounds for this entire system right in there. So this is a heavy bike, and that is done on purpose. It's done because when you're riding at a higher speed, when you have a heavier bike underneath you, it feels a lot more comfortable when you're traveling at a higher speed and have all of that momentum. So that's very much an intentional thing for the bike to be heavy, because at higher speeds you feel safer, you feel more confident. It's providing you with a better experience overall. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about this bike, is that I've ridden a lot of high-speed bikes, usually going up to about 28 miles an hour. Honestly, for myself, past about 30 miles an hour, I don't really feel entirely comfortable when I'm riding on a bike that is of a lower weight, meaning somewhere around, you know, 50 pounds or less or so. It's kind of intimidating for me. You know, maybe you have practice with it, but this bike feels really sturdy, really stable at high speeds. So you'll notice right off of the bat this big die-cast battery case. So this is holding the 48 volt 23.5 amp hour battery right in here, as well as the controller and the BMS and some other electric parts in there. So this motor system is called a direct drive hub motor. So it's a hub motor because it's built into the hub of the bike, and it's a direct drive which is based on the internal mechanisms within the motor itself, the way that they build it. So this direct drive system actually maintains high speed very well. That's what it does best, and that's what this bike is made for. The geared motors, they do pretty good at low end torque. This bike still has plenty, but the geared motors don't maintain a high speed very efficiently the way that a direct drive would. So that's a really good benefit. That's a really good selection right there, to put that motor in the back wheel and to have a direct drive system on this high speed bike. So this bike does employ a throttle and a pedal assist, and the interesting thing is that the pedal assist uses a torque-based pedal assist system that is right here in the middle of the bike, in the bottom bracket, you know, built right in there, and it's pretty smooth and it's actually kind of easy going. And that's one thing that's kind of the opposite towards a lot of electric bikes that you see out there, especially faster ones. Normally they have the pedal assist that goes up to 28 miles an hour, possibly more, and you pedal to get there, and that's where the action is. And in some cases, if they have a throttle at all, the throttle could be limited to like 13 miles an hour, but that's the total opposite with this bike. With this bike, the pedal assist is more of like an easygoing cruiser, kind of almost like a stop and smell the roses sort of sort of riding. It's still there, it still assists, but the throttle is where the action is at. So this system does have the pedal assist there. The throttle is this trigger throttle, or kind of like a thumb throttle, on the right hand side. You go ahead and press that down, and then the wheel kind of gets moving there. We'll go ahead and hit the brakes. So I kind of mentioned it a tiny bit. The brakes have a system inside. These are the ProMax Lucid brakes with regenerative braking, and so that's actually really nice on this bike. Regenerative braking, it has its pros and its cons, but on a bike like this it's quite well utilized because it's a heavy bicycle, and having the regenerative braking means that you can actually encapsulate some of that power to take the stress off of the brakes. So this is a pretty good system, all in all. So the display, let's go ahead and show you how that works. The display works with a pretty simple system. You have a power mode, or not a power on in the back here, and then you have an up or down for controlling your pedal assist, as well as the power output of the motor is really kind of what it's doing there between level 1 through 5. As well, you have your speed displayed right here in the bottom right, as well as your battery level. If you press the mode button or the power button, that will cycle through a few metrics: your average speed, max speed, odometer, trip set, trip time, and then back to speed again, shown in miles per hour. So that's the most of it for the electric system. It's actually a lot of fun. I'm excited to kind of show you what it can do when you're actually using it on the road and on the trails. One last thing I wanted to mention is this little key right here. So I'm unscrewing this little key, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's a pretty simple mechanism. This is a rather peculiar thread pitch, and the purpose of this key is to engage the race mode. So the race mode on this bike is what allows it to go at a faster rate, faster than 20 miles an hour, and also it allows the motor output to exceed the 750 watt limitation that's on there. And all you got to do is just screw this thing in and out. And this is a key that is provided by Vintage. It's for sale for 149 bucks, and they do that to kind of cover some of the extra warranty cost for a high-speed bike that's going at a very high weight too. So it's a pretty good system overall. It's very easy. You don't have to goof with any apps or press any buttons or anything. You just screw that thing in and out, and suddenly you have a class 2 20-mile-an-hour bike, or you have a class 3 28-mile-an-hour bike or more. So it's a pretty cool thing. Just screws right in and out of there. So let's go ahead and put rubber to the road and show you what it does. So I found a nice rocky area that I could put the mountain bike capabilities to the test. It's kind of like a large rock sort of washed out here alongside a trail. But yeah, it's kind of tough to do with one hand holding up the camera. But biking otherwise without holding the camera up, it's actually pretty fun. Whoa. The pedal assist is really nice. It has a torque-based pedal assist that is pretty good. I mean, it's not like it doesn't really take over the way that some pedal assists do. It's pretty easy going. Pedal assist is just kind of there to sort of remind you that it kind of even things out, try to make the bike feel a little more lightweight, because hey, it's a heavy bike, 86 pounds. So yeah, I really like the pedal assist. It feels good. But honestly, the throttle, that's really where it's at. That's where you have a lot of fun. Let's see if I can hold the camera up to the handlebars a little bit and kind of take this thing out. No, this is handling very well for such a heavy bike. It actually doesn't feel so bad. So let me go ahead and show you a little bit about the bike in motion. The first thing I'll show you is kind of the back wheel with that pretty large motor. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So right now I'm in pedal assist mode, and the motor still kicks in a lot. You can definitely tell that the throttle overrides that, and the throttle is kind of where the action happens. But if you want to take it kind of easy, you can pedal assist that, and it's really good. Another thing I wanted to show you is the battery weight. Kind of look at where it is in relationship to the rest of my body and the knees. All right, so you can kind of tell that the battery weight is a tiny bit forward, kind of like right at the bend of my knee where it's at. And that's really, really comfy. I gotta say, I never thought I'd describe a battery pack as being comfortable. I could definitely see myself using a bike like this for a daily driver, for longer commutes, for even shorter commutes to make long ones short. So the off-road capabilities of this bike, they're there, but they're not terribly deep. You know, on that rocky trail that I was on before that had some pretty tall rocks, it can do that, but you could tell it was a little bit of a strain for me to do while holding a camera. If I wasn't holding a camera, I'm sure I could get the hang of it, but nonetheless, it's not optimal, I would say. But on a road like this, picture perfect, picture perfect. Okay guys, we are on the Vintage Electric Scrambler. I've got the race mode activated, so we're gonna get up to about 28 miles an hour as I go through this straightaway. I'm gonna do it on full throttle so you can kind of get a feel for the bike. Let's go ahead. Okay, we got to about 33 miles an hour. Let's go ahead and turn around a couple times. I really like the way that this thing feels when you turn. It's pretty slick. Let's go. Okay, that's actually a lot of fun. I really enjoy the high speed and the high weight combination. That's actually a lot of fun. So one thing I forgot to mention while I was going over some of the features is the saddle. The saddle has a nice, pretty big, wide footprint to it. I'd say it's about 8 inches wide or so, and it has a nice soft leather to it, so it doesn't have like a break-in period like some saddles. So it's nice and soft, and I definitely got to test that as I was coming up the trail here. Now the seat post itself is rigid, and you probably want to keep it that way. Sometimes, you know, you recommend going for a suspension seat post to kind of soften things up. I would recommend going for a seat over a seat post for the moment, because there is internal wiring inside of this seat post that comes into the LED light back here. So this is a 5 LED red rear light that is wired into the main battery pack, and you can turn on and off with the display up front. And that's also wired in with the headlight up here that I mentioned has a 6 LEDs inside the headlight. Both of these actually come on their own. So we were traveling underneath a little tunnel when we were on the paved trail, and traveling underneath the tunnel when it got dark, the lights come on automatically. So that's a really cool feature that I like a lot. Okay guys, thanks for checking out the Vintage Electric Scrambler with me. It's actually really fun. So if you want to check out the full specs and the full write-up, definitely go to electricbikereview.com, where you can compare this with other vintage electric bikes such as the Roadster back there. So yeah, thanks again guys. Ride safe.
Thank you. Bye.